And we are live. And with that, Blake, man, welcome to the Survival Podcast and Bitcoin Breakout, man.
Very good to be here.
Glad to have you on today. This is a subject I've been wanting to talk more about, but it's also one of those I was looking for someone like you to come on and discuss because I tend to not talk about things I don't know, and I don't know a lot about flare gas, but I get the principle. I think it's very, very cool. Could we start out with more of a general Bitcoin topic? Like, I always like to ask my guests, like, how did you even get into the world of Bitcoin? Because none of us were born into Satoshis or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I'm like a lot of other people. I was just sick of seeing a downturn in our financial system, right? Our government just printing dollars on dollars on dollars and devaluing our own currency, right? That is not a good thing. And so we need this alternative, and Bitcoin is it, right? When you think about what it's capable of and what it does from a financial standpoint, it's deflationary, right? And what that means is, since it's finite, it gains value over time, which is really, really cool. That was one of the biggest things that attracted me to it, was just the fact that there's only 21 million in existence. So then I thought, well, geez, I need to get into this. And I started looking at it more deeply and realized that one of the biggest things about Bitcoin is the fact that you can mine it, right? And when I realized that you can mine it and what mining entails, I had to do it. I couldn't stop. You could ask my wife. I built this little shed in our basement type thing with a shelf, and I got some S9s, and I never looked back. She was not happy. The buzzing from the basement never stopped.
Yeah. And then the electric bill went up.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then I learned how to read an electric bill, which was also helpful. And from there, we started looking at getting cheap power, and we just kept going, and that's what led us ultimately to flare gas.
Very cool. I think you guys pretty much operate in the space of Bitcoin only from a company standpoint. I guess a customer can do whatever they want in the end with their miners, but do you draw a line between like Bitcoin and then the rest of the cryptocurrency space? Do you see it overlapped? I mean, are you a Bitcoin only guy, or how's that work for you?
I mean, there's a couple ways to approach that, right? I believe Bitcoin's king. Absolutely. It's the decentralized asset, right? There are others out there with really good technology. Obviously Ethereum, Cadena is really good. Litecoin's been around for a long time, and a lot of those can be very lucrative to mine as well, right? So if you're in this industry to make money, you can absolutely mine altcoins, an altcoin, right? Anything besides Bitcoin, and make money doing that. But from a company standpoint, we believe in Bitcoin 1,000%. Although I do have 2 small KD boxes that I run in my basement. So I can't say we're only Bitcoin, but we do run primarily S19s.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that like almost all the companies I've looked at that are doing the type of thing you're doing, like basically harnessing stranded energy, they all seem to be in the Bitcoin space. They're not out there mining Monero, which I actually have some real respect for, or some of the other stuff that I would call shitcoins. They're not out doing any of that stuff. They're out doing Bitcoin, and that seems to be like everything's being built on right now. So I'm with you. I think you can make money mining anything. And in fact, I know people that are still running GPUs that are mining some various shitcoin that's actually the most profitable shitcoin to mine at the moment. But what they're doing is they're immediately throwing that on an exchange and flipping it over into Bitcoin because they can't directly mine Bitcoin profitably with a GPU, but they can mine some other thing that they can buy Bitcoin with.
No, absolutely. And that's a really good example of what would be done with an L7, right? L7s, they just mine $20, $25 a day worth of Litecoin, right?
Yeah.
And the applicability of Litecoin and the popularity of Litecoin is it's enough that Litecoin's not going to just poof, go away, right? So if you buy an L7 and you spend 12 grand, 13 grand on a miner, the biggest risk is that coin just goes away, right?
Yeah.
And Litecoin's not going to do that. And so because of that, you can do exactly what you said. You just convert it.
Not in the near future. I think a lot of these things, when we say they're not going to go away, the reason I am a Bitcoin maximalist is I've come to the conclusion that Bitcoin will be here in 25 years, 50 years, probably 100 years, maybe more. I'll be dead. It'll still be here. Where Litecoin, I think it'll be around for the foreseeable future, right? But I don't know what does that timeline look like? I think in the end, Bitcoin is the T-Rex that eats everything. And some of these other things, like I always try to temper it like you're trying to do there too. Like there are some interesting, useful technologies there, but I only see one as like a reserve financial asset, I guess is the way I put it.
I agree 1,000%. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to see in the future, you talk about an asset going away in the future, right? I think what's going to prevent anything from going away is going to be its popularity. And the reason I say that is because if you've seen anything in the last couple of years with crypto is a coin can have absolutely no value and yet skyrocket in price. I mean, I hate to say it, right? But Dogecoin is such a good example of that, where you can take an asset. It's literally a trap, right? And nobody knows what it's used for. They don't care, but they're going to take $20. That some college kids are going to take $50 and they're going to buy it, right? Yeah. And then it's going to go up in value. So the popularity of a coin has a big play in how long and how viable it's going to be around, I believe. But I also think that when you take that out aside, Bitcoin ultimately, because of its technology, is going to survive 1,000 times farther.
One of the most interesting things you can do to get a feel for this is you go back to like 2014 when the real explosion of alt started, and then take 2014, take your top 10 crypto coins, and then look at today's top 10, and they keep going forward with that every year. And you notice that like they have about a 2-year cycle, and most of them end up washed out, but some stick around, or some get pimped by Elon Musk or something, right? And then, hey, so you guys are Musk Mining. Anything to do with Elon?
It depends, right? It depends on the day. If he's got diamond hands or not, we're gonna take it. We're gonna take that name. We're gonna be like, yeah, we're totally into that, right? Otherwise, no, we're just musky fishermen from Minnesota, right?
Okay,
we'll just roll with it by day. No, but we love the tech that he's put out, and there's been a lot of really, really good facets of technology that he's pushed forward. So yeah, without a doubt. But We'll go with depends on the day.
I did like when he put out the diamond hands thing right after they dumped a bunch of Bitcoin, and freaking Michael Saylor put out, I think it was like cabbage hands.
Yes, absolutely. Hands, I love it.
What's cool though to me as a Bitcoiner is to see billionaires bantering about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
When like 5 years ago, if you told somebody that Elon Musk and Michael Saylor would be bantering about Bitcoin publicly on Twitter, they would have said you were smoking crack.
Oh, it's nuts. It's nuts, right? It's so cool to see, right? And that's where we're seeing this adoption and this popularity grow, right? And our new modern social media that we have today is going to be the biggest player in that, right? So the more that we have that, and the more that we see people just bantering about it, the better it is for Bitcoin. Let's spread that. Let's just spread the knowledge and just push it as hard as possible. And it's amazing to see. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk a little bit more about mining. What is Bitcoin mining the way you would explain to somebody that doesn't understand? I mean, I remember listening to some guy, they were building one of the first like data centers for mining, and they decided to go to like some West North Carolina town or something like that. And literally like the mayor of the town goes, well, what makes you think they're here? Right. Yeah. Which sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
But if you don't know, it's really not an unreasonable thing to ask, right? So for the person that might even be at that level, what is mining?
Yeah, so it's just a metaphor for earning more Bitcoin, right? And you earn more Bitcoin when you run a bunch of mathematical guesses with your miners, and we can actually probably more easily refer to miners as computers, right? So if you have a computer, it has the ability to throw out a bunch of mathematical guesses using certain algorithms. Bitcoin's algorithm, SHA-256. When you throw out all of those guesses, you're ensuring that transactions are legitimate and added to the public ledger correctly, the cryptocurrency's blockchain. And when you also are doing that, you help more Bitcoin enter into circulation, right? So without getting too far into the weeds, I think that when you really think about mining as a whole, you have to just really simplify it as we're doing two things. We're adding to a public ledger. We're helping verify transactions correctly, and then we're earning more Bitcoin. So when you're mining on a daily basis, you're solving blocks, right? And those blocks are part of that blockchain technology. So every day, on average, about 144 blocks are solved. And of those blocks, when they're solved, 6.25 Bitcoin per block are rewarded. So about 900 Bitcoin on average are mined per day. And when you have a miner, a computer, you earn part of those Bitcoins. So you don't just get one whole Bitcoin, right? You can get 0.0004 Bitcoin per day. And that's just an example to simplify it a little bit. And I hope that wasn't too into the weeds.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And so that's a very simplistic way. And there's a lot of variables that go into mining, such as difficulty, right? Difficulty is just the amount of Bitcoin that you're rewarded. It changes based on how many miners are on the network, right? Because a lot of people would say, well, if there's 21 million Bitcoin that can ever be mined and you just put 1 billion miners on the network, they can all just earn it right away, right?
And it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work like that, right? That's where Satoshi, the creator Satoshi Nakamoto, either one guy or a group, we don't know, anonymous, right? That's where that invention was so genius, because you have to be able to dumb down the ability to earn Bitcoin as miners are added onto the network. So I hope that's not too far into the weeds.
No, and I think it's actually a really important thing. And I think as Bitcoiners, a lot of times, one of the things we shy away from is the technical explanation to no coiners that we're trying to onboard. And I think it's actually a really important topic. And the reason I think it's so important is there's this ethos that goes around in the world of ignorance that is, well, Bitcoin's backed by nothing. It's backed by nothing but it's like ether. It's gas. It's vaporware or something. And Bitcoin is backed by security and energy. That's what Bitcoin's backed by. And without mining, you don't have that. And without proof of work, you don't have that. And without the difficulty adjustment, you don't have that. And I don't remember who was debating. It was somebody was debating old man Boomer Schiff about, Bitcoin versus gold. And he said that Bitcoin was worthless. And somebody said to him, well, what's the value of the Bitcoin network? And they had a stat to it. It was like so much terawatts and so many machines, and so many locations, so many nodes, and like had all the numbers. And he flipped his boomer ass, man. He was like, I don't know, but it's worthless. And when somebody acts like that, you've hit on something that they understand, but they don't want to understand. Right?
Yeah,
That's the way with marketing or whatever, because when you start thinking about the amount of computers that sit around and they spend 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, nonstop, all to make sure that right now, if I send you a quarter of a Bitcoin because I'm going to buy a used car from you, that the exact reality that you now possess the UTXO of that 0.25 Bitcoins. It's yours. And everybody else knows, maybe not that it's Blake's, but this address has control of this 0.25 Bitcoin, this specific piece, and we know and we can trust it. And once you understand that, I think then you can understand there is a huge intrinsic value to being able to transact that way and be able to move. Because people that say it's slow have no idea what they're talking about. To be able to move $1 billion from here to Japan for $5 in 10 minutes, and we start seeing it as a settlement layer and realize layers like Lightning take care of other stuff. There's nothing like it in the world. It's like gold if gold was liquid but weightless. I think Satoshi actually said it something similar to that at one point.
I can physically transport $1 million on a plane faster than I can wire $1 million to China.
That's actually true. As long as nobody takes it from you along the way, yes.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, the safety aspect aside, right? But you get my point, right? Is that our fiat system is so primitive. And when you look at even if it's, we'll even set Bitcoin aside, right? Because there's applicability on stable coins in some facets as well. And when you think about those as well, you can take out the volatility when you use a stable coin, and then all of a sudden, poof, you can send that within 2 minutes, $1 million within 2 minutes across the world. That is amazing to me, because in the world that we live in today, I can call them, I can reach out to them, I can see them on a video. Why can't I send them my money? Right?
Yeah.
Because our fiat system is so controlled, right? It's so centralized, it's so controlled that they don't want that to happen. They want to make sure that they know exactly where every dollar is going, to what bank, from whom, for what. That's frustrating, right? That's my money. That's my financial asset. I don't want people to know what I'm buying, right? And there are obviously people out there that are going to use it for illicit purposes, and that's not a good thing. But you can't use that as a reason to say, oh, because of these individuals, you don't have the ability. We want to make sure you need to be seen as well because they did wrong, right? So I'm receiving those repercussions because of their illicit activity. I mean, this Bitcoin prevents that. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's amazing.
Well,
and in the energy standpoint is a whole nother point. I mean, we got to talk about that.
We're about to go into that, but I mean, it's like, now that you're hitting on that, I think there's actually two things that make the transaction speed of fiat slow. One is the governmental control, but the other side of it is, if I send you Bitcoin, whether I'm a company sending it to another company or an individual to another individual, whether we're using the Lightning Network, whether we're using on-chain Bitcoin, using something like Liquid, I don't care. Any of it, we're transacting an asset, right? It's not a promise, it's an asset. When we transact in dollars, we're transacting in a liability. A dollar is not a dollar. It's a promise based on a debt that is a liability. So anywhere along the way in all this sophisticated especially when we go international borders, you have the potential to end up holding the hot potato and not being able to get rid of it.
It's well said.
Each person in the chain wants to know, okay, Chase Bank, and I'm some European bank, but the transaction's going to India. I don't want it until I know I can offload it to India. So it hangs in this nebulous space, and I want to hold it as briefly as I possibly can in a cross-borders transaction where I'm an intermediary between two other institutions, because it's a debt. If it's Bitcoin, it's an asset. Nobody has a problem holding it, but the beauty is the only people that have to hold it is the guy that had it and the guy that's getting it. We don't need somebody in between.
Right. Absolutely. No, it's very well said. And Bitcoin stops that. I love it. I absolutely love it.
So why would you tell somebody to mine Bitcoin? And I think there's two ways to answer it. There's a simple way, which is some dude that's thinking about getting a miner and plugging it into a shed like you're talking about, versus a customer of somebody like Musk Mining. So let's go with the simpler version first, because the other one has a totally different answer, because you're wasting that damn energy. That's why the second person wants to do it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I usually break it down into two different things, and the first is you can completely ROI on your computer and then earn free Bitcoin after your energy costs. Like that, from a financial feasibility standpoint, is pretty awesome, right? Like if you want to buy Bitcoin, that's fine. That's wonderful as well. Then you own it. That's beautiful. But if you buy a miner and you earn all that Bitcoin back with your miner, and you make that money back, all of a sudden for the remaining lifespan of that miner, you're then earning free Bitcoin, and you're doing the second best thing, which is supporting the network, right? So if you can get to that feasible financial standpoint, it's an amazing thing to mine. You're also taking out the emotional aspects of Bitcoin investments. And what I mean by that is volatility is scary. Bitcoin is very volatile. Cryptocurrency is very volatile. And it's hard for me, and this is just me speaking personally, it's hard for me to see Bitcoin at 65,000 and then go down to 20,000 and think to myself, ooh, I should buy some, right? Because it's so much easier to buy at 65,000, because you can I convince myself, and I see other people doing it as well, that if it's at 65, it's totally going to 75. Like I'm totally going to buy it at 65, because why wouldn't it go to 75? And I'm hitting it at the right time, right? But then you see it go to 20, and you look back, and it's amazing, because at 65,000, people will go, man, that guy bought 3 Bitcoin at 20 grand, you know? And now we're here. and nobody's buying it. It's amazing to me. But what mining does is you're mining every day, no matter what. You have no emotional investment involved, right? Your computer's running, you're earning Bitcoin every single day, no matter what, right? And the Bitcoin that you mine at 20 grand, or say you mine a half a Bitcoin at 20 grand, and Bitcoin goes back up to 65, you just gain that value as well. That's an amazing thing. So that's why we love mining from a kind of a financial standpoint. And I guess we can definitely jump into the wasted standpoint as well too.
Yeah, let's talk about what Musk Mining actually does, right? So, and my whole mindset on everything has changed because of Bitcoin. And one of the ways I've noticed that is when I travel somewhere in Texas, inevitably, if I go far enough, I will drive past some oil rig somewhere venting natural gas with a flare. And I was saying during my intro segment before you were on, people don't understand why they do that. And they're like, well, if it's natural gas is worth money. But the amount of gas that's a byproduct of that oil well, it's the infrastructure necessary to capture it and move it would cost more than the gas would ever yield, at least in any kind of reasonable ROI that a business is looking for. But
You're
that's something
right.
that a company like Musk Mining can go out, you can cap that flare, power generators with it, and start running miners with it relatively quickly, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, right, we're not the only ones doing this. It's not a
Sure.
novel concept,
No.
but it is novel in the sense that flare has been around since oil production has been around, right?
Correct.
But the thing about it is we never had the infrastructure available to be able to consume that amount of potential power, that gas, right? So, for example, if you have a megawatt of natural gas that's just being burned off, right? You're not going to put a Walmart out there that can consume a 1 megawatt worth of energy every day, right? You're not going to put
Yeah.
a housing development out in this
Yeah.
rural community in the middle of Texas, in the middle of North Dakota, in the middle of wherever it may be, because it's not feasible. So you just burn it off, right? And now we have the ability to put a 40-foot box with computers that run 365 days a year and pull a megawatt of power and don't require any kind of emotional support, no infrastructure, right? No, nothing, right? It's literally just machines, and they're consuming this power, and it would otherwise be wasted. Now, what you said is absolutely right. You also don't have the infrastructure to transport said gas, but there's another side where when you produce oil, you're always going to have that byproduct, right? And it might not be high enough of a byproduct to even think about transporting. So you just flare it off. And when you consume that with Bitcoin mining, not only do you get a net zero production, you also see that you get a better amount of oil produced at your facility. And when we're talking about oil, I'm being a little bit too specific, I think, because
Yeah.
there's like in Texas, we're on a micro LNG site, right? So we are literally just pulling the flare from a liquefied natural gas site. And that's pretty amazing for us, right? And then there's other
Hold on,
plants
explain
out
that
there.
to me, because if you're doing natural gas, how do you have surplus natural gas? How does that work?
Yeah, so when you produce it, you always have a waste byproduct. You will not be able to consume everything, right? So whether that waste is 5%, whether that waste is 10%, you just have to figure out exactly how much of that you can consume and how much you have available. And there's other variables too, right? You have to understand pressure of that gas because you have to feed it into your gen. You have to understand what molecules of gas you're getting, right? Methane, propane, butane, pentane. There's a lot of different molecules out there that will burn better or burn worse. So that'll impact how well your gen set runs. And so there's a lot of variables that you have to consider. And that micro LNG site is really unique because as long as that plant is running and producing micro LNG, we'll always have flare, right? Because a lot of these flares that you drive by in rural Texas, you assume that they're just pockets of gas that were byproducts of oil production, which is absolutely true. But going back to the micro LNG site, it's unique because will always have that flare as long as that site is running, right?
Gotcha.
And so that's another unique facet, but they would also just waste it away otherwise. So it's pretty cool.
And I think there's other sources of energy that are basically flare energy. My understanding is like every major landfill in the United States is required to flare their gas, and their gas is all of our garbage decomposing, right? So that's I don't know if you guys are working with anybody like that, but I see no real difference in how the technology would work, and literally every landfill could be mining Bitcoin.
No, and that you're not wrong at all. We've been approached. We're not working with anybody like that yet. I think that's the future. Any flare site that has a feasible amount of gas and good enough quality should be mining Bitcoin, period. I mean, it just should happen. There's no reason not to. One of the things that makes me very comfortable about where we are off-grid mining, flare gas mining is just off-grid mining, is that when legislation sets in, and I don't want to get too into the weeds about the government, but when legislation sets in, we will be looked at as using simply wasted energy, right? We're not consuming on-grid coal power that's impacting a community, right? We're doing it we're just using otherwise wasted energy. I mean, why not let us continue? And why not make it more prevalent? You know,
because that energy will be there, and without you will be wasted. And I think that goes beyond, for Bitcoin, that goes beyond what Musk is doing, in that there are other places where we wouldn't be harnessing a flare of energy. What we harness is energy that can't be transported. So you're kind of a two-stage solution. You have a power generation thing, and you have a miner. The miner, trailer is a mobile mining system. Well, that mobile miner could go anywhere that you can get power. So, for instance, a lot of these wind farms, they have a surplus of energy. That can be, that just can't, I think it's just hard for people to get their head around. I don't care how many batteries you have. I don't care what you got going on. There's a surplus of energy being produced that will never get from this field out in the hill country to Austin suburbs. It is gone. Correct. It is like a fart in the wind, and it disappeared, but it could be harnessed. And to me, what that also says is we can, you said like, you're not going to build a Walmart to use that 1 megawatt of energy. But if you can develop an energy source, you might build a small town, but you need something to monetize the energy to make it worth developing the flipping energy.
Absolutely.
And so, we need in my opinion, we need 100,000 small towns that are strong versus trying to revitalize cities that are in complete decline and total decay.
No, 1,000% agree. And to your point, you're exactly right. When we go out there with our computers too, we're creating a usable asset, right? We're not just generating something that puts money in Musk miners' pockets, right? We're creating a financially viable, feasible asset that is usable over generations and generations. That's the amazing thing that we're doing, is we're creating something. We're creating something that will never, and I believe will never go away. I love it.
Yeah. It's certainly a very high on the scale of permanence. As long as we're going to be using these sources of energy, there's going to be waste. And you can have all the pie in the sky crap you want about we're all going to live off of solar panels and jelly bean fields, and it's not anything that's imminent for humanity. Europe's giving us a pretty good look at that right now, what that looks like when you start saying, oh, we got enough, we're going to be fine. No, you're not. Like, Europe without natural gas apparently is not a great place to live.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the world is in a little bit of turmoil right now. If it could just calm down, that'd be great. But we're absolutely seeing the impacts of energy and how it can just really hurt a community without it, right? And that's something that I was never taught about energy in high school. I didn't understand energy before I was in this business. I didn't realize how absolutely necessary it was, right? Because I'm just flipping on a light switch and all of a sudden it was good to go, right? I didn't realize that the amount of grid power that we have is we just need to be able to develop our system more sustainably. And we're seeing that absolutely in Europe. We're seeing that on the global impacts of countries fighting with one another, right? I mean, the war is it's this very scary thing, but it's teaching us a lot about how important our energy grid really is and how sustainable energy is very important. It's pretty bizarre to see.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things the United States has that Europe doesn't is we have massive reserves of energy. Like for all the talk of having to get oil from the Middle East and whatever, we have massive energy reserves. There are parts of the world that don't, or what they do have, either due to environmental reasons or just financial extraction costs, they can't afford to develop. One of the problems in Ukraine, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, is that there's all of this natural gas available in Ukraine. Ukraine can't afford to get to it and actually extract it. And so they need outsiders to come in and do it. But there's so much corruption, they're absorbing all the outside money before it develops the resource, right? And it's just a mess. And now you got a war there, right? So like we're not going to solve that today. So let's stick to Bitcoin. But like there's a lot of places in the world that have like conflict zones where stability would be reliably available energy. So,
Right.
like, when I see like a giant waterfall and I full well know why you can't turn that into hydroelectric energy, I'm like, but you could. And or like El Salvador, talking about building a volcano city using geothermal. Like without Bitcoin, that model doesn't work. We'll see if it works, but we know without Bitcoin, it doesn't work. It only could work with Bitcoin.
Right. No, totally agree. And there's a lot of ways that we can use Bitcoin miners as a very feasible, non-subsidized approach to build our energy grid. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of guys out there making a lot of money, right? So if you allow them to come in and allow them to develop the infrastructure to make more energy, whether that's wind, whether that's hydro, whether that is whatever it is, when you do that, the infrastructure that's developed can be distributed throughout the community. And it wasn't subsidized by the government. We didn't print more dollars. We let the Bitcoin mining infrastructure come in and help, right? It's a very, very just good solution to energy infrastructure that's being overlooked, right? It's pretty awesome.
It really is. So let's talk about how if a person wants to get started mining, let's go back to that kind of bifurcation there. Let's start off with a person that like it's 2022 and the best time to buy Bitcoin would have been about 2009, on a laptop, and that's not going to happen anymore. What's the best way for a person to get started mining at home?
I mean, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to check your electric costs, right? That's always my go-to is look at your bill. And we help people look at their bill often. They're very confusing. There's demand charges, there's on peak, there's off peak. I mean, it's pretty wild stuff. So when you realize how much energy or how much you pay for your electricity, that's going to be the big kicker, right? Because S19s right now, they're not entirely they're not extremely profitable at home operating costs. Call it 12 to 14 cents electric prices. So we've been actually pushing for self-starter home miners the KD boxes. They're really, really good. They're 200 watts, which is pretty minimal. You can run them profitably at high power costs, and they're really, really quiet. So, and they run on 120 volt power, which is awesome. So if you wanted to start home mining, look at those electric costs, find out what you have. From there, decide what miner is the most profitable, decide what makes the most sense for your operation. Some guys have businesses and they use electric costs as write-offs. Some guys form LLCs and only mine certain coins that they believe in, right? It just depends. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've heard about people doing too is when it comes to a mining pool, there's pools now that literally say your hash power is worth X. And it's not about if the pool did or did not find Bitcoin that day. They know that based on what's going on right now, if all the people in their pool are mining at X, that they will have about Y, and they're willing to like pay out on buying your hash power alone. And I think for a lot of, like, if you have one miner, I think that makes a lot of sense than hoping your pool finds a Bitcoin a day.
No, absolutely. You definitely should join a pool. Just for simplicity, a pool just allows miners to basically combine their hash power and get a better chance of earning more of the currency that they're mining, right? So we always mine in a pool for sure. Otherwise, you might hit a reward at some point in time. I mean, some people do it and then they hit a full Bitcoin, and they're laughing all the way to the bank, which is fine. It's a big risk. We only mine in pools. It makes things much more predictable. You can see how much you're going to earn per day. You can see how much you have earned per day, which allows you to make it more feasible over a long period of time. So yeah, absolutely join the pool. And then if you really think about, getting into things from a large scale, the easiest way to do that, or even a medium scale, right? Call your electric company, because a lot of people will buy the miners and then call their electric company. Do it the opposite, right? I sell miners. Don't do that. Don't buy miners first. Call your electric company and say, hey, what can you give me per power? Can I get a better rate? Do you have some companies have buildings that they own that they know have electrical infrastructure in place all ready to go. Call them, right? See what they say. I mean, you're the consumer at that point, and you're about to pay them a bunch of money to consume their electricity. They like that, right? They'll help you probably, but also be cautious. There's a lot of fine wording and legal fees within their contracts that can be very misleading. Especially right now, going back to the war, it's impacted the gas prices globally. So, we've seen on-grid power providers increase electric costs for small-scale miners and for large-scale miners. So, guys were getting pushed contracts 12 months ago when they were starting these farms, and they were pushed contracts across the table stating, hey, we are giving you this electric rate. And then on page 21, it stated, something along the lines of, oh, by the way, we reserve the right to increase it to this at this point in time if this happens. And then lo and behold, it did, right? And now they're paying this extraordinary electric rate. So be careful. Just be cautious is all. And do your homework.
I think one of the things you touched on, and it's really important for people to understand, is the timing aspect, where like you can actually have a miner that comes on during your non-peak hours and shuts off during your peak hours. And
Correct.
People would think, well, I'm not maximizing my miner. You are, because running something at a loss is bad.
Absolutely.
Right? So if I'm running a restaurant and I determine that I lose money every day from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., I just turned if I'm smart and I want to stay in business, I just turned my restaurant into a dinner-only enterprise.
Correct.
Right? I'm not going to operate at a loss. Now, if I have a loss one day a week and I got to be open for consistency, fine. But if I'm going to lose every single day from 8 to 1 or 8 to 3, I'm not open. And unlike the restaurant, there's no problem with that S919 running at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? The ATF doesn't say you have to shut down your liquor enterprise with your bar at 2 a.m. and send everybody home. And, nobody goes out to eat dinner at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Except drunks that left the bar that they got kicked out of and they go to Waffle House, where you can run that whenever. And a perfect example of this, and this is unique, but it's really cool. I had a guest on a while ago named Brian Harrington. You probably know him from Twitter. He's with Choice, and he's kind of gotten to the whole homesteading and all that other stuff we talk about. He's put solar in. And he literally, his solar panels every day charge up his battery bank till they can't fit any more power in the battery bank. And then they run his Bitcoin miner until the sun goes down.
Love that.
It's not a lot of money in Bitcoin, but it's, he pieced together his miner and all that. It's long since paid for itself. Well, he's in California. In Texas, they would have to literally pay me what I pay them. In California, he would get something like 2 cents a kilowatt hour, right? Instead of, the 30 cents, because California's stupid what he's paying for it when he has to buy grid energy. And so all that surplus energy is running the Bitcoin miner. Now, it wouldn't make sense for him to constantly run off that solar panel. he's saving himself the money of buying from California by using alternative energy and then flipping that over. And I know that right now he's actually looking at expanding his solar array to generate even more power. Well, it wouldn't even make sense to generate more power unless he expanded his battery bank without the Bitcoin component.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. Absolutely. And you're just adding to the amount of people that understand green technology and green energy generation. And that's another positive aspect of Bitcoin mining, right? You're encouraging that knowledge to become more prevalent and understand how we can be more feasible in the future to generate more energy. And going back to your restaurant example, right? If you're closed from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., and that's in the summertime because all the college kids went home, right? Yeah. Imagine the college kids are at home when we're in a bear market, right? And then Bitcoin comes back and the college kids come back and we're in a bull market. Then all of a sudden it's profitable to stay open all day because you have the individuals there to eat, right? And that's the same thing with Bitcoin mining is maybe you have high electric costs during the day, but then Bitcoin goes way up in price and it's still profitable to operate at those costs. So you can adapt with mining just like you can in another industry based on the markets, which is pretty cool.
And it has that advantage of being able to harness the stranded energy and be able to basically not use energy when either it's not profitable for the miner or when the grid people need it for something else.
Yep,
that's incredibly advantageous because a lot of this stranded energy stuff, well, they want that peak so that when there's a giant heat wave or like the freeze we had a couple of years ago here, that surplus is available to keep the grid going. Well, if you tried to harvest that surplus energy by, say, putting a data center there, because Bitcoin mining farms are basically data centers. It's just a different kind of computer where a lot of our data centers today, they're running basically web servers. Like I pay 800 and something bucks a month for a dedicated web server because of the amount of, volume of listeners I have and downloads. So if my server company went to a wind farm and said, we'll buy all your surplus energy and build a data center right here at the wind farm. When that wind farm says, hey, we need you guys to shut down for 7 days, I'm kind of pissed. I'm going to punch somebody in the head. My whole business, I cannot afford my server to be down. But if I have a mining co-location agreement with them, that kind of comes with the territory. There'll be times when your miner's not mining, but I don't have an expense at the time because unlike a web server or whatever, you can literally just have this mining farm running thousands of miners and it can shut off and turn back on. And it's up and running in literal seconds. And there's nothing else in the world that does that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and what we're seeing too is that the large mining farms are doing that, right?
Yeah.
The riots of the world in Texas, that their 750 megawatt facility during peak hours of Texas heat, they were shutting off.
Yep.
And it wasn't ERCOT calling riot and saying, hey, you got to shut off right now. It was all computerized. It was literally a signal that was sent like poof, shut off now because we need it. And then it can turn back on. Right. And that's an amazing thing because Bitcoin miners from an industry standpoint are very willing to work to make it feasible for everybody in every community. Right. And that's a pretty cool thing.
And that actually stabilizes the grid. Because again, that power generation facility can't just people get this weird thing in their head. They watch too much TV. Like, we'll just kick another generator on or something. Like, it doesn't work that way. You can't just go, hey, we need an extra 10,000 gigawatts. Like, turn the dial up. They have to be operating at a capacity. And again, generally what happens is that surplus energy is lost. Right? So they have to be at that capacity, but then they have to be able to deliver the surplus. So they have to be able to afford to generate the surplus, which means not getting paid for energy you generated, which, okay, now you're paying 14 cents, but if they're generating 30% more, their cost of that energy they're selling you is 30% higher.
Absolutely.
Like, we have total economic illiteracy in this country, and no one thinks that way. Everybody thinks as a consumer that the person selling you the thing is always trying to get you and rip you off and whatever. Companies are in business to make money, and they do that by serving customers. And if they're not profitable, guess what? You turn the switch on and the lights don't come on. Because we have this expectation. I don't want to go, oh, gee, I need power now. And then send a cell phone signal because that's got a battery in it. And in 30 minutes, I'll have power. We want to be able to walk into a room 24/7, 365, flip a switch and a light comes on, right? Or go, it's kind of stuffy in here, and go click and the AC comes on. And we want that on-demand power, and that requires that surplus. And that's something that, like, to me, once I understood that, and this was years ago when I used to sell industrial computer hardware, that I understood, I was like, we should be teaching children this in like friggin' like 8th or 9th grade. But we don't, because there's no incentive for the state to teach this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It starts hurting things like class warfare if you start teaching people that, oh, you mean companies have to actually work really hard to deliver a service to me, and they can lose money when they do it? They don't just have money because they're companies, right? No, those would be banks, right? Like there's a sitcom I watch, and there was like a husband and wife that were fighting, and there was a third friend that was causing all the problems, and they didn't realize it at first. And the guy's like, I guess I'm just not a good husband. She's like, no, wait a minute. You're a great husband. And the two of them stop all of a sudden, and they go, well, then what's the problem? And then they turn to the third friend and are like, you. And I think there's like this, there's going to be this collective moment where the people of this country turn to the banking sector and go, you are the problem. You are the manipulator. You are the ones that are devaluing the money I'm trying to save for my kids' college. The reason that keeps getting more expensive is the money's worth less every freaking day by design. And when you do your job right, it's terrible. And when you screw your job up, it's much worse, which is what I think what we're seeing right now. Like, what they do is a horrible thing, but when they fail at it, it's even worse.
Right. No, I agree 1,000%. And I did want to make the point too, there are going to be hills for Bitcoin in the future, right? And we know those are coming regardless. Yep. In my opinion, one of the biggest hills that it has to overcome is legislation, governmental legislation, right? And that is inevitable. It has to happen. It has to be regulated in some facet, right? Now, different countries are going to do it differently, right? And so the United States is going to be a big player. Maybe they'll tax the living crap out of it. I don't know. Maybe they won't. Who knows? But that has to happen. Now, that being said, that for me is going to be kind of this almost inevitable approach where we have to look at it from a political standpoint and say, all right, who's involved in this and who supports this? And we have to have companies like Musk or like the big boys behind us, right? There's a great organization in Texas called the Texas Blockchain Council, right? Mm-hmm. They do really good work that tries to push forward good legislation for Bitcoin miners as a whole, because there are positives out there, but there's also negatives where people don't understand what's going on, and they're high in politics, right? They're high ups and they don't know what's going on. It's very scary. So, I mean, we talk about overcoming this lack of knowledge and not being taught about energy. Well, what's scary to me as well is these politicians that don't know a damn thing about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But they know there's a stigma on the coin. They know that it's been used, black markets, whatever it may be, Mount Gox or, the Silk Road, whatever it is. And they focus on these stigmas, and it's very, very nerve wracking. So I hope we can overcome that. And through that, gain more adoption, right? I mean, I talk about adoption as is very similar to Facebook. That's what I see, right? If you think about the social network and what Zuckerberg did from an approach is he didn't go to Harvard and Yale, right? He went to the surrounding colleges to advertise for Facebook and had them adopt it first, the smaller ones. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing with Bitcoin, right? The El Salvadors, the third world countries that are going to adopt it first, that need it the most. And then we're going to see the seconds, and then we're going to see the first, because they have to. Right. It's going to be the little guys first, and then the big boys are going to be like, oh, all right, okay, we'll figure this out. Hopefully we don't have some craziness in the political system.
I think this is a big reason why you've seen so much foot dragging to allow a Bitcoin ETF. And there's a lot of Bitcoin maximalists like, we don't need them. It's our money. Something else. Like, you don't understand. The day they pull the trigger on that, it's not just number go up. It becomes a retirement asset and a teacher's pension fund. It becomes a retirement asset in a police officer's pension fund. It becomes a retirement asset in a firefighter's pension fund. And you know what you don't fuck with, to be blunt? Retirement assets in public servants' pensions funds, right? You can't. At that point, any idea that you're gonna squeeze it out or get rid of it, you literally can't do it. You could put it in a, son of a bit, you could put it in a futures ETF. Well, that nobody really understands that. Basically, that's also, I think, been a big suppression on price, because the futures ETFs that are out there, literally in their perspective, say what they're going to do in the days they're going to do it on. So if you're playing short squeezes in the market, you literally know here's the value of this fund and here's their execution dates and what they're going to, and they have to do, because they're a ETF and they're a regulated concern. They literally, you can do almost anything you want, but you better do what you said you're going to do. So you have this known quantity in manipulating price now. And I think it's a twofold thing. One, they're afraid of, like, once it's fully out, like, you literally can't stop it. But two, I think there's a lot of really, really wealthy organizations, entities, people, nations who would like more Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And I swear to God, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic at all. You get a true, regular, flat spot ETF for Bitcoin, and you're $250,000 in 6 months. Like, I don't care if it starts at 5 or 50, you're $250,000 in 6 months, and it doesn't come back, because when people buy in the form of an ETF and a retirement account, it's by its very nature very long-term holdings.
No, I agree. I agree 1,000%. And I think that is going to come with adoption, right? So when you think about statistically, right, what was the survey? It was done in 2021. The amount of crypto users globally, 3.9%. Yeah. I mean, that's nuts. We're so early. We're so early. It's amazing. The internet was born in 1983, right? This is our Twitter bio, right? It was born in 1983. Bitcoin is, call it, 2009, call it, X number of years old. Like, I can't math on the fly.
You've got mail. That's where Bitcoin
exactly.
is, right? It's you've got mail.
Call it 12 years old.
Bitcoin's still doing a 14.4 handshake. If it's the
nuts.
internet.
It's nuts. It's Google in 97. It's Apple in 96. It's give me all of that. I'll take all of that every day, right? Give me it all. And that's amazing. We are in the internet of money, and it's so early. I love it. It's another reason to mine. It's another reason to buy Bitcoin. It's another reason to just support the network, all in all.
So let's get back to your company for a minute, because the great philosophical stuff, but I also want to make sure we get you some exposure on this. Who is your ideal customer, and what does it look like engaging with Musk Mining? So I would imagine that is somebody that's producing oil or something else that's causing a flare.
Yeah, so we go out and we go to producers and we just say, hey, you guys are flaring. We'd love to pay you for that gas. And we analyze the gas and see how long it'll be around, right? A lot of guys, I'm not going to lie, it just because it's waste, it doesn't mean they have to sell it to us, right? Like, we'll offer them money, and some guys will just say no because they don't want to. And that's fine, because it's not ours. Other guys are like, you're going to pay me how much for this? Yeah, absolutely. Right. There's really good stuff out there. But, from a customer standpoint, we really just look for operators of a wellhead that have the optimistic approach, that want to get into, using a wasted asset to make more money. And then from a hosted client standpoint, we're just looking for individuals with high power costs that want to get into Bitcoin mining. Because when we charge, we have an MOQ of 5 units for our hosted units. And when we charge 8.5 cents all in. That's an all-in cost. What I mean by that is there's no racking fee. There's no, service fee or anything like that. That's about $199 in S19. And we see that as a symbiotic relationship. And the reason for that is there are guys out there that have 14-cent power that want to mine Bitcoin. So if you buy a miner or 5 and you send them to us and we run them for 8.5 cents rather than your 14 cents, it's feasible for everybody, right? We're consuming wasted energy. It just makes sense from a symbiotic relationship. You talk about a business and making money for everybody. Everybody wins.
No, I'm glad I drilled down on this with you then, because there are different models harnessing this flare gas. There are models where the company literally says to the mining company says to the gas company, we'll sell you this equipment and install it for you, and you're the miner. You're doing a different thing. You're saying, I will buy the gas from you for as long as it produces for X. Correct. And then you're actually putting your own mining equipment or a much smaller customer's mining equipment in that facility. So my colo, instead of being a data center using hydroelectric in Washington, is in a back of a Connex on a flare site in rural Texas.
Yeah. And I mean, right now we're setting up shop in Louisiana. That's where we're at. And
there's a lot to develop there, man.
It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And so yes, absolutely. We want to make it as easy as possible for the operator and as easy as possible for the client. We're doing the majority of the heavy lifting, right? We supply the gen sets, the containers, the internet, everything, right? We have the man on site. I mean, we want to make it simplistic, because when you get into the details, it's so much harder to make it viable. It's just scary for everybody. So, I mean, one thing I do want to add, I mean, the Connex concept of putting miners in a Connex container, that's absolutely true. But there's also what we've seen in the industry so far is these amazing manufactured containers that have been really, really well done, right? Specific to Bitcoin miners. And so we found that there's really good suppliers out there. Upstream Data is great. AI Pro is great. There's a lot of guys that we work with that have developed a product to run these miners really, really well. Okay. And specific
so you're working
to
with
flare
Upstream.
gas.
I'm familiar with them. In fact, they were the people that I put in my presentation last year. And my own people kind of doubted that this isn't coming technology. This is here.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
No, I mean, Steve Barber, the creator of Upstream, has been doing this for a very long time. I don't want to say the year. I think it was like 2016 or something. But I mean, that alone has just been awesome to watch, because what I've seen with these container suppliers is that they're not afraid to admit when they're wrong, right? They can put out a product and be like, oops, we didn't do this well enough. Let us help you fix it, right? And yet they know that it's going to continue to work, because they know pulling this flare is a really, really good thing. Like Upstream has I know I'm shouting it out a lot. Steve, you better give me some heart emojis or something on Twitter. But they have a container that has a gen set in it already, right? Yeah. I mean, it's really cool. So you just hook up to the gas and you go.
One trailer, so you don't have a generator trailer and a mining trailer. You have a generating mining trailer.
One box, one trailer, one pipe. You're golden. Flying, and you're making Bitcoin.
And it makes it redeployable. So if we have a flare coming to the end of its useful life cycle, we're out hunting for another energy source, and we can just back up a trailer, take a crane, pop that thing on there, move it over, hook it back up, and turn it back on.
Absolutely. We have to have that mobility. That mobility is key, right? So the lifespan of our Louisiana location is approximately 3 years, but we know we have other sites ready to go when that's done. Right, we're planning ahead. We're looking at other states, right? We're looking at Mississippi. We're looking all over, right? Yeah. And we have those contracts ready to roll. And what's given us that ability to do that is the presence that we've already established, right? Because once you have an operation going, it's so much easier to say, "Hey, can we take your gas? Look at what we've done so far," right? Because that's the biggest intro. The barrier to entry is pretty thick, right? It's a little bit challenging, but once you get in there, it's a lot of fun.
Once you do one site for a company, it's like, oh, nothing blew up, nothing exploded. Guys didn't rope in out of ATF helicopters and shut us down. Like whatever fantasy is in their head didn't happen, and their money's green. They paid the bill.
Yeah,
shit, do it all. And I think that like the thing that crosses political boundaries with Bitcoin, and it does start out initially very much in the libertarian anarcho space, because it's obviously a dream come true for an anarchist like me. Like, oh, money without government, sure. But if you start thinking about this, think about the person that is not a complete nut job, just a person that would describe themselves as left politically, cares about the environment, and cares about their local services. Can't you see this person eventually getting to the point where they hear about this? If they're open-minded enough to investigate, they understand now what's happening. This stuff is being wasted, and it could be making Bitcoin. And maybe they don't care about making money, but they care about the fact that they're trying to get their park upgraded or whatever. And down the road, the city's running a landfill. And when Bill drives by it in his Prius, there's this flare of freaking flame up in the air. And Bill going to the town council and say, wait a minute. Or goes by the sewage treatment plant, same thing. He says, wait a minute. Don't you know that we could be harvesting that? And there's all this, it's bad, but you're burning it anyway. And there's a point where even the most blockheaded, boneheaded person, that little tiny bit of information infiltrates, like gets through that giant cell wall, gets an ionophore and crawls in there, and the light comes on and wait a minute. This is what we're going to do. I mean, my city of Fort Worth, I'm not really in city proper, but it's my address is city because I'm out in the county. They say, we're mining Bitcoin. The city of Fort Worth is mining Bitcoin. I think they're running 2 S19s or something in one of their data centers. It's not huge, but, it's a start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think even when you think about the landfills and you think about other applications and harvesting that wasted energy, there's other ways to do it. If you think about it, you could have a centralized location where they just harvest bleed off of gas, right? Or byproduct of production, right? So you take a big, they call them queens, right? The semi-trailers that have, big tanks on them, and you fill them with gas, but they're just the bled gas that would normally just get wasted anyways. And you bring them to a centralized location that's mining Bitcoin, and then poof, you're consuming the otherwise that would have just been bled off gas, which is another application. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this and say, wasted energy, how do we consume it? How do we make a viable asset? 99% of the time, Bitcoin's the answer. It's really cool.
Bled off gas, is that kind of like, so if you run a big shop compressor, air compressor, what you really want to do if you want it to last a long time is you put a little valve in it that bleeds off a little bit of air every day.
Sure.
And it bleeds off that air because with compression over time, you get moisture and it bleeds the moisture off. So it's a maintenance thing. Is that what you mean by bleed off gas? I've just never heard of that before.
No, you're good. And that's a kind of a novel thing that we've been considering. And now I'm getting into the weeds, and I know when I'm getting into the weeds, but I'll do my very best to explain it. So what it goes to for this, for an LNG site, right, is a really good example, right? So you make a gas and you deliver it to a consumer, and then you offload all of that delivered product. And when you offload, you're going to have some leftover, right? Okay. And you're going to kind of like the ice at the bottom of the glass. Now imagine being able to use the ice at the bottom of the glass by being able to bring it to a centralized location, adding it into a centralized tank, and then consuming that centralized tank that has 5 other glasses of ice connected to it, right? I hope that made sense. Basically, you're just taking that minimal amount of waste and you're adding it to a centralized location and consuming it. It requires infrastructure. It requires
it's just another form of stranded energy, basically.
Correct. So let's use it.
Yeah, indeed, let's use it. So that's really cool. So the average person that wants to get a single miner could work with your company. I really didn't understand that, because most of the companies I've looked at, they've been marketing more of that. They deliver the solution and somebody's buying, a $12 million or $50 million setup. So that's making it more scalable. That's awesome. And that way, I think we need all these players, because there's greedy ass oil and gas companies gonna be like, we're gonna mine some Bitcoin. We're gonna mine our own Bitcoin. Like, I think Exxon's mining Bitcoin now, or at least forming their ways into doing it. But then there's the smaller producers that are like, I don't understand this. That's the mayor that said, how do you know they're in the ground here in North Carolina, right? They don't get that, but they do understand we'll pay you X dollars per day for that gas you're burning that's going away. And by the way, now it's my problem instead of yours. Because I talked to one dude that's working with a company doing something similar, and he said one of the biggest advantages to him is they have more security on site.
Right.
Because obviously when you put this Connex in and this generator and you got millions of dollars of equipment there, it's kind of important, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit important, right? You don't want it to go away. So he said it improves security on the job site.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very helpful thing, from that standpoint too. And security is very, very, very important. We take it, obviously very, very seriously as well. But we're also, the rurality of the sites helps too. You're in the middle of nowhere, so that's a good thing.
Cool. So let's take a few questions here from the audience. We'll see how they go because I wasn't really reading them. I was just anything with all caps. I was starring. For later, what kind of work is open for an orange-pilled truck driver, gas tanker delivery in the industry supporting the Bitcoin network?
Hey, honestly, I think the best way to answer that is keep an eye out. I know those jobs are going to come on board. They're going to be out there soon. It's just a matter of giving it more adoption time. So I don't know of any jobs right now, but yeah.
There's plenty of jobs for truck drivers right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Brian said, both of your thoughts on existing sources such as Vape's use of landfill flaring, any other New Deal proof sources we haven't taken advantage of yet?
I think the newest that I could think of is that bleed off, right? And that's the best solution that we've kind of considered so far. Otherwise, it's just a matter of getting operators on board with what we're doing. That way we can open every door, right? From landfills to stranded wells to LNG, right? We just have to get that adoption up.
I think the place that I would look for more exploitation would be the sewage treatment flares because
I like that. Yeah.
Right. So like if you think of landfills, there's a lot of places where there's a bunch of small communities and the landfill is very far away from all of them. And they're all going to centralized landfill. And then that's what vaping is doing. Right. But there is probably relatively close to any, when I say decent size, I'm to 20, 30, 40,000 person settlement. They're probably on their own sewer treatment. And it not always, but in many cases, that means it's going to fall under local government's purview to what gets done with that. And I think that's a place for proactive activism because I think activism at the federal level, unless you're a lobbyist, you just forget about it. Right. And you better be a lobbyist for like a company that measures their sales in hundreds of billions or no one even talk to you. But we can still get things done at a local level. And one thing local politicians don't want to do is get fired. And right. I found the way to motivate them is to point out that if they don't do a thing, they're going to look really stupid. Right. Don't call them stupid. They get mad and throw you out. But you're like, if we don't do this, we're going to look really stupid. And then there's this extreme motivation to not look stupid. And so there's a tremendous amount. I think the last thing I read on this was like 1,200 sewage facilities that flare that have no capture plan. Right. Not they don't capture. They have no plan to capture at all. Like it's just there. And to me, that's the thing that, let's harness the value of proactive Karens. Right. Yeah. We always give Karens a bad rap because if you can get 5 or 6 Karens going to a town council meeting going, why aren't we harnessing that and making money with it so that we can fix the swings at the park? Right. That's a whole different Bitcoin argument. I've never heard it before, but I think it's one we could have. Absolutely. Absolutely. When cities get involved, it's going to be a really good thing. It's period. And then we can use it to improve that infrastructure, just like you're talking about. See, I think there's this whole mentality in the Bitcoin space of it's ours, not the government's, but it lacks the subtle understanding of asymmetric warfare. So to me, Bitcoin is the first asymmetric weapon. There's asymmetric warfare, but there's never been an asymmetric weapon before. So what I mean by an asymmetric weapon is if we go back in time, there's no semi-automatic rifles, and I invent the first AR-15 or AK-47 or whatever, right? And no other nation has it. I have the only repeating rifle in the world. The worst thing that can happen is anybody else gets it. I don't want anybody else to get it. I don't want anybody to copy the design. I want to maintain this symmetric warfare where I have the advantage for as long as possible. And what happens when they get it, nobody's advantaged. We go back to being even. Where if you have an asymmetric weapon, when your enemy, your adversary, your competitor, call it what you want, picks it up and uses it, you get stronger. So if cities start adopting Bitcoin, it's good for Bitcoin, even if I don't like what the city's doing with it. Because that's where we actually clearly start to define it as money. right? It's money. And so if it's going to be money, then it needs to be the most widely used settlement tool on the planet if it's really going to be money. And so I think that it's always good when anybody picks it up and runs with it. I was talking to Adam Curry on Twitter right when the Elon stuff started with Twitter. And I can't remember who, somebody called out Elon and was like, hey, integrate Lightning on Twitter. And Curry was like, bullshit. Remember when he rug pulled us? And I'm like, yeah, but Bitcoin's for everybody.
Right.
Bitcoin's for everybody. And it's a good thing. K-Bonk says, what's the kilowatt required for mining, thinking of micro mining at the homestead feasibly?
So I mean, kilowatt hours, you'd be looking at approximately 4,800 for a KD box Pro.
Okay.
That's 200 watts, right? And that's per hour. So multiply by 24. It's pretty straightforward. That would be the best start for just a small operation.
Okay. K-Bonk also said, can you write off a miner on your taxes? My way of interpreting that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is it would be an asset in the business and subject to depreciation. So unless it's somehow qualified for accelerated depreciation, you would say it's a 5-year life cycle. If you did a straight linear depreciation, 20% per annum, or you could do a front-end accelerated. So that would all be a conversation with your accountant, but it's not I bought the miner and it was 15 grand and now I write minus 15 grand. It would be apportioned across time as it depreciated. Is that how that works?
So I've always been reluctant to answer these questions because I'm not a tax professional. So don't take it as such. But what you said is very reasonable. The lifespan, you approximate it at 5 years, and it all depends on whether you're a business or not. That's a big thing as well. But the other thing is how you get taxed on the coins that you mine and when you sell them, right? So I would encourage you just, your CPA, there's a lot of Bitcoin tax attorneys out there or tax strategists. So contact one of those and get a good example on that.
And we always have to be careful as podcasters with these answers, because even if I give you a perfect answer today, it might not be tomorrow, and you might listen to this on Friday.
That's that legislation too, right? The legislation might change.
It just changes, or the way the IRS interprets the existing regulations changes. Sometimes they'll put out letters of guidance and things like that. So tax attorney, CPA, I give that answer like we've talked about doing a TSP branded 8-ball, the magic 8-ball, and one of the answers would probably be tax attorney, CPA.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it
because that's just how often we use it. Brian says, does Musk have a minimal expected production capacity limit before they work with a producer? I guess that's the expected life cycle of gas flare.
Yeah, so we look at a wellhead based on its MCF per day. So approximately 1 megawatt is around 270 MCF, maybe 300, depending on the quality and pressure of the gas. We'd like to take advantage of the small wells. There are, going back to the upstream containers, you can get 350 kW containers, 360 kW containers that allow you to take advantage of those smaller wells. But bigger the better. Give us the big stuff. So we're all in it.
Like I said, I think you're looking at two things. You're looking at raw volume and duration, right? Like those are
correct.
Two parts
and
of the
quality.
equation. And
quality, volume,
right?
quality, pressure, duration. Absolutely. And we actually have a geologist that we work with too, that we consult, that he has really good knowledge of what we're seeing below the ground that allows us to see the duration of the gas, which is a really good thing. There's a lot of players on the team that help us succeed that are way smarter than I am.
Yeah, I remember Henry Ford's famous thing about somebody asked him why he didn't go ahead and get a college degree once he got all rich, and he said, "Because I have thousands and thousands of people that have college degrees that work for me." Right?
Yes.
So I have access to the information, I have access to the talent. No matter how smart anybody is, like you can't run an enterprise on your own. You can't do it. I've always said that about what I do. Like I could be a lot bigger than I am, but I like being a one-man show and not having to deal with people. And that comes as a trade-off. And if you want to grow, you have to deal with people. And then you have to realize that you want great people. You want to build them up. And then you want them to go out and do great things for you. So you need smarter people than yourself. And one of the biggest reasons I think entrepreneurs fail is they're afraid of people that are smarter than them. And that is that is a death sentence to a company. So it's good to hear you say that.
If I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Wrong.
Yeah. Shout out Carl Williams. He did teach me that one. So
awesome. Well, Blake, this has been a great discussion. You want to tell people how they can learn more about how to work with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, check out our website, muskminers.com. You can schedule an appointment with us to talk, or just send us an inquiry from there. We're on Twitter as much as possible. We're on Reddit. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. So check us out, Telegram, at Musk Miners for all of those. So, but our website's great. It has my number listed on there and my partner Chris's number listed on there. I don't know how much longer we're going to be doing that. I get a lot of phone calls a day. Good problems, really good problems. But I also want to be able to have people put a face to the name and let them know that their money's not going wasted. So, how much can I read that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Plug and play package. I pay. Do they do all the shopping and setting up? Yeah. So we help you figure out what miner you want and what is most feasible for you. And then, we set it up. We send it right to our location, and
we kind of an average cost. Like if somebody wanted a miner in one of your facilities, I know that.
Sure.
Yeah, he's asking what an average cost would be.
My bad. So we have 5 unit MOQ right now. That's approximately, so the S19s, the cheaper models would be about $3,000. So you're looking at about 15,000 for an investment, and that'll get you 5 S19 96 terahash units and get you rolling mining. So,
and what's kind of like rollout? Way back years ago, I had a guy that was a very small independent guy, built a mining facility. I recommended him. It worked out for some people, not for others. Eventually went out of business during the great crypto crash of 2018. So there is some concern over that. Like, you guys are not, what he was doing, and I didn't know it, he was selling equipment before he had it while there were shortages, right? So like, what is like delivery expectancy? If I went there today and I paid you $15,000, when do I see my equipment up and running?
So we're looking at late September deployment right now. That's what we're quoting, mid to late September, maybe mid-October, depending on our container manufacturing. So,
So we're 30 to 40 days.
Sure. Yeah. And if we have a container on site, normally that'd be 7 to 14 days.
Okay. Cool. And K-Bonk says TSP mining co-op. We'll see, bro. I don't know, man. I kind of let people do their own thing anymore. Like every time I split energy and then other people get involved, it's I run a one-man show. I'm just saying.
I love it.
Anyway, Blake, muskminers.com is the website. Great Twitter account. Lots of great information comes out there beyond just, hey, this is what we have. I have links to everything from you guys in the show notes. That'll be available in the audio version of this podcast, which will be up about 1 hour from right now if you're watching it live. If you're watching it in rewind, it's probably already there. There's a link in the video notes below. And remember, there's always all kinds of yummy links down there in the video notes too. Like, if you're a Bitcoiner and you're not using the fold card, you hate money, don't do that. There's a link down there where you can get 5,000 free sats. Start using the fold card. And if you don't pay for your S19 miners with your fold card and get your 1.5% back in Bitcoin, I don't know what's wrong with you. So again, Blake, thanks for being with us today, bro.
It was wonderful to be here. Had a great time. I really appreciate it.